The standoff between Indian and Chinese troops at Dolam is now well in its fourth week. The rhetoric that's coming out from Beijing is not just getting sharper with each day, it's now literally bordering on warmongering. Look, we've had previous border standoffs as well, including the infamous one in 2013 in Dapsang. But somehow the rhetoric this time has been unusually harsh. Is China just trying to scare India with tough talk in the hope that India would pull back its troops? Or is it time for us to double down for the long haul, call out China on this bluff, because these troops aren't going home anytime soon? Face-off at the Dolam plateau. That's our face-off tonight. China ratchets up the war rhetoric to a new pitch on the 4-week-old face-off at Dolam. Chinese Foreign Ministry accuses India of trampling on Panchsheel, one of the pillars of the bilateral relationship. It demands a precondition for any form of talks, and that precondition is that India must pull back its troops to restore trust. And we'll be putting those questions. How do both sides pull back and de-escalate after having publicly ratcheted up the rhetoric to such a high level? Here in our studios, we'll be joined by Tom Vadakan, spokesperson of the Congress Party. Mohan Guruswamy, senior economist and distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, will be on the panel tonight. General retired BP Malik is former Chief of Army Staff. KC Singh, former diplomat, secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Aina Tangan is a political analyst. He'll be joining us via Skype from Beijing. And KJM Verma is senior journalist with the Press Trust of India. He'll also be joining us from Beijing. The dragon is upping the ante. Is this merely war rhetoric? Is it time for India to call China's bluff? Or is it time to double down and prepare for the long haul, because it doesn't seem like this is going to get over anytime soon? That's our big face-off. We'll get to our guest panelists in just a couple of minutes and our debate in just a couple of minutes. Here are the other headlines, though, that we're tracking this Wednesday evening. On the business leg of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel, India and Israel signed 7 memoranda of understanding on counterterrorism, agriculture, space cooperation, higher education. They issue a joint call to crack down on terror groups. On the emotional front, there's a meeting with 26/11 survivor Moshe Holzberg. Prime Minister Modi will address a 4,000-strong gathering of the Indian diaspora later tonight. Simmering communal tensions in Bengal's North 24 Parganas district. The Home Ministry asks the Bengal government for a detailed report as politics around the verbal spat between Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee and Governor Kesrinath Tripathi now takes centre stage. RJD Chief Lalu Prasad Yadav picks Priyanka Gandhi over Rahul and keeps out Nitish Kumar for a grand anti-Modi alliance that's being planned in the run-up to 2019. He's asked Akhilesh, Mayawati and Kejriwal to come together. One nation, one tax now reaches complete realization, with Jammu and Kashmir passing a resolution in the Assembly to join GST. The State Assembly clears this near unanimously after those scenes yesterday, those scenes of violence and drama. Today, better sense prevailed. It is now officially the longest standoff between Indian and Chinese troops since the 1962 war. And day by day, the rhetoric from Beijing is reaching almost warmongering proportions. Today, Beijing came out with an elaborate statement, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson saying that India is trampling on Panchsheel, which is one of the foundational agreements, one of the very bases for this bilateral relationship. Is this China just classically trying to be a bully? Or is this rhetoric stemming from something else? Has the Chinese President Xi Jinping taken personal insult at India boycotting the OBOR Forum back in May? And how does one de-escalate after both sides have publicly ratcheted up the rhetoric to such a level? And how do they do this before both principals, both heads of government, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping, meet in Hamburg on the sidelines of the G20? And that's happening in a couple of days.
Nearly a month since the India-China war of words over Dolam began, the rhetoric has now been raised to a new level. After talk of historical lessons, comparisons between 1962 and 2017 and betrayal charges, China now fires the most viscous salvo yet, ratcheting up the war rhetoric to dangerous levels. accusing India of trampling on basic international norms, demanding India withdraw troops to restore trust, stressing that the incident violates the spirit of the Special Representative's mechanism. India's Ministry of Defence says it is using satellites to keep a close eye on Chinese troops and increase naval and spy movement in the standoff zone and in the Indian Ocean, where China has increased its presence. The Ministry of External Affairs is kept closely in the loop. China is stepping up the heat just days before Prime Minister Modi meets President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Hamburg, posturing then that could point at the direction of the summit meet. Once again, China looks to thrust the onus of stepping back on India, demanding that India cow down to threats. Is China using heated war rhetoric as a tactical stick against India? And is it time to call China's bluff? The debate tonight on Face Off at 9.
Before we get to our debate, and we'll get to it in just a minute or so, CNN News 18's Maria Shakil spoke to the BJP's National General Secretary Ram Madhav, who has played down China's warning. He says tempers need to cool down at the face-off point, adding that bilateral trade, as a consequence, will remain unaffected.
Sir, China has put out a precondition that India must withdraw its troops from the Dolam area, and then only the tension between the two countries will diffuse. I remember you had written a piece that increasingly the kind of reaction that is coming from China is becoming more aggressive, almost bordering on threat. Why are we seeing this kind of face-off?
It is a bit surprising, the timing, the kind of language that is being used by the Chinese media. Unlike Indian media, Chinese media is always seen as guided by the political dispensation in that country. For the first time, after so many years, we were told that even in the middle region, there are perceptual differences about where the line of actual control exactly lies. Now that is the reason why we have an issue today in at the tri-junction area. What is needed at this juncture is for all of us to calm down. Such situations have arisen earlier also. I would recall what happened in 1986 in Sundurangsu Valley in Arunachal Pradesh. We had the similar situation, direct eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation. Our forces stood meters away from each other for 6-7 years. So this kind of situation arises sometimes on the borders. What is needed for the leadership on both sides is to maintain some peace, calm, and then handle the situation.
Cool heads need to prevail. Unfortunately, though, the rhetoric that's coming in from Beijing has been unusually sharp and harsh, one would say, even bordering on warmongering. Let's try and bring in our panel tonight. Here in our studios, we're joined by Tom Vadakan, spokesperson of the Congress Party, Mohan Guruswamy, senior economist and distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, General Retired BP Malik, former Chief of Army Staff, KC Singh, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Aina Tangan is a political affairs commentator joining us via Skype from Beijing, and KJM Verma, a senior journalist with the Press Trust of India, based in Beijing for a number of years now. Let me start with you, General Malik. We have seen similar sort of standoffs at critical junctures between India and China, including the one that we saw in 2013, which lasted for 21 days. Why, though, has the rhetoric this time been so harsh? I mean, I said it borders warmongering, because if I remember right, even in 2013, we didn't see this kind of rhetoric coming in from Beijing. Why is this time different? Do you sense that this time is different?
Yes, Zakka, it is different, and the fact is that in recent times, many divergent issues have surfaced between India and China relations, and one after another. There is this Indo-US relations, there is the OBOR dispute, the NSG entry of India, Azhar Masood Azhar, that problem. And now what is coming out is the Indo-Bhutan relations. These are the issues which have been surfacing, and I expect that in the years to come you will see more of bullying, a greater show of power,
okay,
and also even nibbling operation along the line of actual control. So these are the things that you can expect in the years to come. We have to be alert, we have to be prepared. These are at the geopolitical and strategic issues which make me make this statement. Now, as far as the face-off is concerned, this dispute has been there for a long time over Dolam Plateau.
Yeah.
But what they have now tried to do is, by construction of a road, a new development which has taken place and which affects both Bhutan as well as India. Now, this standoff, the way that is going on, it's an old dispute, but it is really speaking, testing the relations between India and Bhutan.
Right.
And of course, it affects India because by constructing this road, they can bring heavy equipment very close to the corridor, Siliguri corridor, which is a sensitive area for us.
Let me get Ambassador K.C. Singh into this. The statement that was put out by the MOFA spokesperson in Beijing today, unusually strong. I mean, it even goes to the extent of saying that India is trampling on Panchsheel, which is one of the cornerstones of our bilateral relationship with the Chinese. China is considering issuing an advisory to its citizens living in India. It says in order to earn back the trust of its neighbor, India has to withdraw its troops. The Dolam incident violates the spirit upheld by the special representatives mechanism. Would you go so far as to say that, I mean, like I said, we've had standoffs in the past, in Dapsang, we've had it in Demchok, we've had it in the eastern sector as well, but to have phraseology like this is trampling on Panchsheel, where is this coming from? Where is this rhetoric coming from, Ambassador K.C. Singh?
Well, the China experts, at least in South Bloc, nobody wants to speculate on why, but I can hazard it. You see, firstly, it's been happening over a few days. It started with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then the Bhutanese issued a démarche, then yesterday their ambassador took it up, today the Foreign Ministry again, then in between the Ministry of Defense criticized the Indian Army Chief. So it's been a series of public statements. It's not just one or two, and each one is sharper than the one before. Now, I agree with General Malik that one of the reasons probably is they were testing Bhutan out because they thought that probably Bhutan would buckle and would let them do what they want. That is why they have taken up 3 points. One is, they said, the Indian boundary between Sikkim and Tibet was settled in the 19th century. India doesn't think so. We don't accept that. Secondly, they said, who is India to interfere in Sino-Bhutan affairs, and why should India come to the help of Bhutan? Now that they're complicating, they're involving Bhutan in it, trying to embarrass it. But I think probably the Chinese have misread the three-way relationship between India, US and China. Because after Mar-a-Lago, I think they came away thinking that with the US withdrawing from TPP, with US in a sense going back onshore and leaving China alone to do what they want and not interfering with the South China Sea operations of China, they assumed that India is isolated. But the joint statement was so directly attacking China. Almost everything that India had been saying and America had been saying is in the Indo-US joint statement. Even to the extent that one belt, one road and the sovereignty issues brought in, the viability of those financially is brought in. So, and in the meanwhile, the American, Trump has done a double take. Because of North Korea or whatever, he started ratcheting up the pressure on China.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
the Chinese are now finding that the Americans are back. They've in the meanwhile irritated India. So they're caught between the two.
No,
so I think it's not a sign of confidence.
I want to bring
Their
in
behavior is not a sign of confidence.
Okay, I want to bring in Aina Tangen into this conversation, and again, I'm trying to understand why the Chinese are uncharacteristically. I mean, like K.C. Singh said, it's one statement after another, and the rhetoric is only getting sharper by the day. My point is this: the facts on the ground, as has been laid out by the Ministry of External Affairs here in Delhi, is that this was started off in the first week of June when the Chinese unilaterally attempted to build a road which would have come into disputed territory that's disputed between Bhutan and China, and it is only after a formal request by the government of Bhutan that the Indian troops got involved in this theater. But that's not how the Chinese view it.
No, it isn't. In fact, I think the dates are quite clear. Indian troops interceded before the damage was registered by the Bhutanese. Now remember, China and Bhutan do not have diplomatic relations officially. They work through Delhi. So in this particular case, the Chinese, all they see is that Indian troops cross a well-known, accepted, demarcated border into area that is claimed by China and has taken up space there, interfering with its ability to do the road.
No,
now,
but that's upon request. No, I know. That's upon request. That's upon request from the Royal Bhutan Army.
That was upon request, but not to the Chinese. As you recall, there was an agreement that any kind of disputes would be settled not by force, but by negotiation. That was violated from the perspective of the Chinese side.
All right.
They expected if there was an issue involving a road, that it would have been taken up and negotiated. That was, in fact, the agreement. The fact that Indian troops unilaterally moved across a Chinese border, yes, this has gotten China very upset.
Again, I'd like to reiterate, A, it was upon request from the authorities in Bhutan, specifically the Royal Bhutan Army, and more importantly,
yes,
this was after the Chinese were attempting to build a road there in what is disputed territory. But let me get Tom Watakan in for a political.
I can only argue.
All right, let me get the others in. Let me get the others in.
I can only argue with so many people.
Yeah, no. I'm not going to make. Einar, I'm not going to make you the villain of this piece.
You cannot.
I'm not going to make you the villain of this piece.
That's quite all right. I'm trying to explain the position that China is taking.
Got it.
I am not Chinese. I'm an American.
Got it.
I'm just pointing out that if you take the totality of circumstances, that you're going back to 2012 when China said that the Sino-Indian relationship would be the most important relationship going forward.
Let me get Tom Watakan in.
You had.
Okay, let me get Tom Watakan in. There are others also waiting on the panel. Politically, you feel that this has been mishandled by the Modi government, and why do you feel that?
We have not said that. We stand solidly behind the government in taking corrective measures in national interest with respect to any border situation with China. While saying that, national security is going through a turbulent time. Now the point here is the language that's emerging from China, especially on the Panchsheel and the issues, they're trying to make it out playing the victim card. Our commitment to Bhutan has been complete, reiterated by Srimati Indira Gandhi during a press conference that we will stand by our treaty with Bhutan. Now they are doing this fishing operation and trying to test waters, what would be the national response. Now,
no, but they've got the national response for more than 20 days now. There's an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation.
But last 47 days, last 40 days, we have seen 125 intrusions. Now, this ball game must end. The ambassador of China in India says that the ball is in the Indian court. Okay. Now, the point is, this kind of jargon that's being used by China is standard operating practice, but that doesn't mean we should not be cautious. Our attention should be, nowhere should we be in any situation be taken in by the views expressed by China, because this is a sharp-edged weapon. We have seen it in 1962. Now the point here I'm trying to make is, while the entire operation is based on a test on Bhutan, the focus is also on a Malabar exercise.
That's right.
They are worried. Their submarine is there. The operative procedures are there. So these games are far-fetched.
Okay,
so we need to understand that.
KJM Verma, would it be a mistake to view the face-off at Doklam as an isolated incident, sort of driven by local factors, or is there more to it than meets the eye? Because the sense is that the Chinese were very upset that India decided to boycott the BRI forum back in May, which Obor is seen as a personal project for Mr. Xi Jinping, as personal as, let's say, Swachh Bharat is for Prime Minister Modi. And there was a lot of heartburn in Beijing when India decided to boycott that forum. Is this China's way of telling India that, all's not well and we didn't quite take kindly to you boycotting the forum, especially because it comes, what, 2 months, 3 months before the 19th Party Congress?
I think you put things in a very appropriate context. If you look at today's editorial, especially the China Daily's editorial, which was more sober and more analytical when you compare it with the Global Times, it directly links it to India's boycott of the BRF, that is Belt and Road Forum. Obviously, among all the top nations, India was the only one which boycotted. Even US sent a delegation to that particular meeting. However, whether they are really committed to this particular concept or not, but their presence mattered for China. I think the Chinese also tried their level best. If you remember, the Chinese ambassador to India came out with several proposals, even tried to tone down the rhetoric, even offered to rename the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, though it was later withdrawn. But they have tried all that, attaching that kind of an importance to India to attend it, at least symbolically. In fact, well before that, the Chinese Foreign Minister, Mr. Wang Yi, in his press conference said there will be a representative from India. But unfortunately, I think that that proved to be wrong. There were expectations that India will be represented at least at the level of the Indian embassy officials. So I think that's what China is very cut up. But this particular incident, obviously, the timing of it is, well, it follows the BRF forum, a boycott, and of course, Mr. Modi's visit to US just ahead of it. It started around June 16. So Mr. Modi's visit was around June 25th. Though we cannot link it up with the outcome, as Mr. K.C. Singh was trying to point out, but of course, the context cannot be taken out. Okay. But the other thing, of course, I think the only one point that I would like to make out is that I think basically we have seen the same kind of rhetoric, the same kind of actions against Japan in 2014 or 2013 when it came to the Daewoo or the Senkaku Islands issue. We have seen the entire official media gearing up. There were even went to the extent of demonstrations. And there was a lot of flack that Japanese have taken in China. I hope we are not going down that road. Okay. But it appears that, judging from what the Chinese official media at the moment looks like, they are hell-bent on pressing this issue forward.
I was there in Beijing. This was late 2012, early 2013. There were protests outside the Japanese embassy. But the fact is, now if you look at it in hindsight, we're in 2017, what the Chinese managed to do with this sustained sort of propaganda campaign, both in their official media as well as daily statements by their foreign ministry spokesperson, is to actually change the reality of the island's dispute. It's now virtually in China's control, and that's what they managed to do over a period of 4 years. And I agree with Mr. Verma. If this is going to be the beginning of trying to change the reality of whether it's the Tri-Junction or any other part of the extended dispute, then I think that is something that India should be extremely worried about. Let me get Mohan Guruswamy in on that point that KJM Verma made. That look, even countries like America, Japan, did send a token representative for the BRI forum. And given how this was a personal prestige project for Xi Jinping, coming as it does a few months before the 19th Party Congress, which would pave the way for a second term for him, was it a mistake for India not to send a representative? And are we seeing the blowback of that in what's happening in Dolam?
I think India had no option. You run a road through a highway through a disputed territory and don't ask India about it, and then run it through and then say that, come and attend the meeting. There was no way India was going to go. India had been protesting for many months about and I think for over a year, about the alignment of the road and saying that you're going over our territory. On the other side, when we went to the ADB to build a dam on the Siang, the Chinese objected, saying this is disputed territory and you shouldn't build. So, there are these issues, and so given the background, there's no way India is going to go. I don't think the Chinese particularly expected India to come. And why should India go? The OBOR otherwise doesn't concern India. The main track goes through Kazakhstan into Russia into Europe, and this so-called pathway along the sea which doesn't touch India also. So how does India come into the picture? This is a question I was asked in China again and again last week, and this is what I said. What is there in OBOR for India, and what is OBOR?
No, but
I think
the point that Mr. Verma made.
Let me just finish. They're building a rail track at a time when shipping rates for a very long time will be much lower than what the rail freight will cost.
Fair enough. No, I think the point that Verma was trying to make. Can I just add that? Well, the point that Mr. KJM Verma was trying to make, and I think it's well taken, is that A, it's a prestige project. Two, the Chinese have, over a period of at least a good two and a half, 3 years now, invited India formally and informally to be part of OBOR. And three, yes, India has valid reservations. I'm not taking anything away from the fact that this passes through disputed territory, this passes through POK. India cannot be seen as openly endorsing it. But to boycott a forum, that is loss of face. And loss of face is a big thing in China.
It's not a forum. It's a conference. It's an announcement, you know, of a major project which China has started on its own initiative without consulting others, without taking others into conference, lending money, is using its surpluses lying in American banks and European banks where it doesn't get interest, and is trying to deploy it into pump priming its own economy, which have got, you know, severe demand issues now. When I was in China, I heard again and again that the OBOR has been driven by specific interests of the construction companies, the infrastructure companies, the cement manufacturers, the steel manufacturers, and that, you know, the Chinese themselves are now realizing that maybe they're biting a little more than they could chew. Okay. Look at what happened in Hambantota.
Yeah, that's right. I agree. I agree on that point. But Casey Singh, again, I keep harping on OBOR because you know, I think it would be a mistake to view this face-off at Dokola in isolation. I don't think the Chinese do anything in isolation. And this was not merely because of local factors. It's not like just a Chinese road-building party just landed up at Dokola and started building a road, and then, you know, this confrontation happened. This is clearly, you know, there's a lot more that's happening behind the scenes, and you need to link. And in China, in any case, you have to read between the tea leaves. I'm just curious, how could have India played these cards better? Yes, we have legitimate sovereignty concerns when it comes to the parts of OBOR that pass through POK. Yet, boycotting, I don't know. You tell me.
No, I think I agree with Mr. Guruswamy that we could not just take Belt and Road Initiative lying down because it is clearly Pakistan and China ganging up and trying to legitimize something which doesn't belong to either, particularly because in the 1963 boundary agreement where Sakshkam Valley was ceded to Pakistan, Chinese themselves have conceded in the agreement that is subject to final settlement of that area. Now, all of a sudden, how has the status of Gilgit-Baltistan changed from 1963 to now? But the Chinese have a tendency. So, look, with two rising nations, with competing nationalistic leadership in both of them, it was inevitable that sooner or later, you will cross each other's red lines. And I think somewhere we have to draw a red line. Now, we can assume either it was a local operation of building the road, people in Beijing didn't know, or they were deliberately testing the Bhutan-India friendship, they're testing India, they're testing to see how far, or they were just simply trying to punish India. And therefore, they have dug in, having found a cause, or they were provoking India so that a cause is created. We don't know. But the net result is that today we have an enraged China, and there is no way that India can do a unilateral withdrawal, because in that case, there is loss of face at this end.
Yeah.
So we are looking forward to what you said, a very protracted standoff, and hopefully then, I think the test will be, will President Xi and Prime Minister Modi meet on the sidelines of G20? If they don't meet, that would be another notch up in terms of generating tension. If they meet, there's a possibility they can find a mutually acceptable way of getting out of it over a period of time.
As of now, the only sort of confirmation that we have is that there is a BRICS heads of government meeting that will happen on the sidelines of G20. So they will be in the same room for that. There is no standalone pull-aside bilateral as it's known. between the Chinese president and Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines of the G20. So we'll know in a couple of days. But I want to go back to General Malik. I mean, the difference and the critical difference this time, General Malik, is that this involves a third country, a sovereign third country in Bhutan. And in Bhutan, opinion is also divided. There are some folks, certainly within the opposition, and Bhutan goes to polls next year, who wouldn't mind doing business with the Chinese. They have had, I think, 24 or 25 rounds of boundary negotiations between the Bhutanese and the Chinese. And essentially, I mean, as they say in this part of the world, mota mota, what the Chinese are offering is a swap. The western side, which is Dokola, the plateau, for the northern side, which I'm told for the Bhutanese is a much larger area, much more important area, because there's a very sacred Buddhist hill there. How does India do this delicate balancing act? On the one hand, yes, India is doing this for Bhutan, an all-weather friend, and it's doing this upon request by the Royal Bhutan Army. Yet at the same time, we are still on the land of another sovereign.
Yeah, Zakka, first we must understand the kind of relationship that we have, security relations that we have between India and Bhutan. We are literally responsible for the security of Bhutan. Bhutanese army does not have the capabilities that they can defend themselves against anyone. And we have been supporting them all along. We have an agreement with them. Now, yes, what you are saying is right. There are some people in Bhutan who would like to maintain better relations with China. But I think both our countries, India as well as Bhutan, understand that without the Indian getting involved, particularly in this area of Chumbi Valley, Bhutanese will not be able to do anything on their own. I also want to correct one other fact. You see, while the Sikkim-China boundary is demarcated, except for the tri-junction which is under dispute, the Bhutanese-China border on the other side is not demarcated, and this problem has been, this dispute has been there for decades. The only thing is that graziers have been grazing their sheep and all, and the Bhutanese as well as sometimes Indian observers with them have been observing that area. As long as there was no military involvement of construction of our developmental development taking place, we were quite okay, it was going on and there was no major dispute. But in case they want to grab that area and construct a military usable road, then obviously neither Bhutan can stand that nor India can stand that. And if there is a testing between India and Bhutan, I don't think India can afford to compromise on the assurances that it has given to Bhutan.
That's right. There's in fact a treaty that backs that, Aina Tangen. I mean, there's a treaty which says between India and Bhutan that all of Bhutan's security needs upon request will be heeded to by Indian security forces. And that's been the case this time too. Again, it was upon request by the Royal Bhutan Army that the Indian troops actually got involved in this theatre. I mean, that's the fact that the Chinese, whether it's the Foreign Ministry spokesperson or editorial pieces in Global Times and Xinhua, seem to conveniently overlook.
If the situation were reversed and China was coming to the aid of somebody they called their weather friend,
and crossing into Indian territory, I wonder how that conversation would go. But let us not quibble. There are also some signs that China is trying to de-escalate the situation. They allowed 52 visitors, people who were going to a sacred lake, to cross safely, and they are on their way after being previously refused.
No,
so
but
there
they
is something that shows that China is trying to demarcate the issue, the difference between having troops in your land
that trip.
versus...
No, Einar, hang on a second. They canceled that trip. It's a holy pilgrimage. They canceled that trip and sent the pilgrims back.
Yes, but you have to look at the news today. The pilgrims were allowed through today. that was announced, and they are safely on their way to Tibet to visit the lake, and that has been reported by both the Chinese and Indian press. So there is something where China is trying to demarcate the issue of having foreign troops on their, what they believe is their soil, versus trying to de-escalate other situations. But don't remember, this has not been in a vacuum. Earlier this year, there was a upgrading of the four Indian major Air Force bases, the landing of a C-19, which is your largest airplane, a cargo delivery vehicle, the opening up of your longest bridge, which allows you to export troops and tanks, and it was pointed out that heavy tanks could go on this road all the way into Andhra Pradesh. So, I mean, this has not come within a vacuum. It is not suddenly the Chinese have done this. There has been, on both sides, a lot of saber rattling, which is not to anybody's benefit.
No.
China and India
Einar, the fact is, hang on, 1 second. The fact is, when you're talking about infrastructure, the Chinese, the infrastructure on the Chinese side is about 10, 20 years ahead of the infrastructure on the Indian side. It's only in the last 5, 7, 10 years that India has actually seriously invested in infrastructure in the northeast, whether it's motorable roads, whether it is other transport infrastructure. So you can't complain that India is building roads on its side, because the Chinese have done that for the last 20 years,
Sir,
25 years.
I'm not stressing. I'm pointing out that China sees militarization happening on the Chinese side. It's responding in turn. And you have this upward spiral of militarization on both sides. I was saying that both sides are at fault in this particular issue. If you want de-escalation, both sides need to back down.
Is this a blowback of the serious military infrastructure upgrade that's been going on in the northeast for at least a good 3, 4, 5 years now?
Oh, well,
on both sides, yes. I don't think that this is
Mr. Verma,
related to that.
My questions to Einar, my questions to Mr. Verma.
Yeah, Einar is trying to articulate very well the issue on both sides. But I think one thing that I had to say is that the kind of the longest bridge that what we built connecting Assam to the northeast, that is not a disputed territory. It's very much inside India's territory. And we have been seeing it, the Tibet itself on the Chinese side has about 6 airports. And if we are talking about Nathula Road connecting Kailash, that means that you have a motorable highway about 1,200 kilometers straight to Kailash. So it is a well-connected kind of an infrastructure on all sides. That why they have to pick up this particular road at this particular time is no way related to the kind of bridge that what we built, I think, in Assam. But at the same time, the particular today the narrative that what the China is trying to highlight today is the foreign ministry is that one, the 1890 treaty is what binds India to Sikkim Accord. The Sikkim border issue is settled, the 220 kilometers on. But the interesting thing what General Malik is making is that tri-junction part of it has not yet been settled. This cannot be a discourse between Bhutan and China alone. There is an India involvement. Yeah. So I think probably the thing that what is missing in this entire discourse in the last 2-3 weeks is India's proactive, rather we don't have to refute what China is saying, but India has to clarify. Of course, there is a very detailed statement issued last Friday
that's a great point.
by this.
I will get
but
to
at the same time, I
to
think,
that. But let me get Tom Vadakan also into the conversation. Do you think that this will get resolved by the time the two leaders meet in 2 days' time?
We'll keep our fingers crossed that hopefully that this issue will be resolved. From what I heard from Mr. Ram Madhav's interview to your Maria Shakil, was clearly indicating that they are looking at it very soberly, and there is an attempt of trying to curb the excitement that the Chinese media is trying to make, and hopefully diplomacy will win through, because you see the whole history of this Indo-Chinese confrontation is being noted by Arnold Toynbee. If you closely study, this is a civilizational war. Both civilizations, India and China, that's a history behind it. While Toynbee makes a prophecy of it, I'm sure the Indian end will contradict that prophecy, because the Chinese expansionism with civilization, then strength, then vexing their muscle, part of the game, standard operating procedures. But India must be watchful and sober on any such issue.
Just a quick round of closing comments. K.C. Singh, are you surprised that, I mean, we've had in the last 2-3 weeks since this conflict sort of flared up, this standoff flared up, we've had just, I think, one statement from the MEA, and that was last week after the Bhutan government put out their formal statement. Why is the Foreign Office being extremely cautious about this, unlike the Chinese Foreign Office, which seems to be ratcheting up the rhetoric virtually on a daily basis?
I think one is the obvious attempt not to get public opinion excited in India, because then if both sides of the public opinion is excited, it becomes so much more difficult to deal with it. And second is because there is Bhutan involved, you don't want to ratchet it up too much, because then it may embarrass those people in Bhutan who in any case like to handle these things without excessive publicity. So being a three-way thing, probably this is the sanest thing, but that doesn't mean that we should not put out. I think there is a paucity of good maps. Nobody really knows. If you go on the internet, Dolam plateau is showed anywhere from alongside Bhutan on the Bhutanese western border to ultimately a dot on the bottom of the Chumbi Valley. Why don't we have proper maps which show us exactly what is happening there, or at least maps how India understands it? MEA needs to put those out. And that, I think, is not ratcheting up public opinion. Educate public opinion. You don't have to excite it.
All right. I'm going to leave it at that. But like I said, it is going to be difficult to try and find a middle ground. There have been instances in the past where, you know, this standoffs like this have gone on for days, for weeks. But there was, at least at the highest level, an engagement, a back-channel engagement to try and diffuse the situation. This time, though, at least it certainly doesn't seem like in the next couple of days they'll find a resolution to this. They'll find a way in which both sides can back off before that meeting happens in Hamburg. We'll see. We'll see how the story plays out. It's not going away from the headlines, like K.C. Singh said, and I said at the top of the show. We've got to double down. This story is very much in the headlines for the next few weeks. Thanks very much to all my panelists for joining us. I'm going to take a quick break here on the program. When we come back on the other side, the other big foreign policy story and foreign policy shift in that sense that's been happening is in Israel, where Prime Minister Modi has undertaken the first visit ever by an Indian Prime Minister, and an emotional high point today when he met Moshe. We all know him as Baby Moshe, but he's a young man now, Moshe Holzberg, the survivor of 26/11. He lost his parents there. He met the Prime Minister today, and it was a touching scene. We'll have that replayed when we come back on the other side. Welcome back. Prime Minister Modi today met young Moshe, the 11-year-old boy whose parents died in the 26/11 attack when he was just 2 years old. He gave Prime Minister Modi a touching message in Hindi. Listen in.
Welcome to Israel, our holy land, to holy city of Jerusalem. My name is Moshe Holzberg, the son of Rabbi Gabi and Rivki Holzberg. I am 11. They are sent by Lubavitch Rabbi. I am 11 years old. I was saved by my very special Nani Sandra. May God bless them. My parents lived in Mumbai.
You're Indian Nani.
My parents lived in Mumbai. They helped every person, Jewish and not Jewish, alike. The house was open to everyone. I now live in Israel with my grandparents, Rabbi Shimon and Judith Rosenberg, in their house in the city of Afula. I may want to bless my grandparents for my father, Rabbi Nachman and Frida Holzberg. I am an happy child, thank God. and I love to play. I try to be a good student. I would like to wish you Amara Shirwad Abki Sat Hebot Radan Renge Salotak. I want to ask you something from all my heart. Please continue to love me forever and always remember my parents. I live in Afula, but all the time I remember I'm connected to Naramana. I grew up there in Mumbai. This is my home. I hope I will be able to visit Mumbai. And when I get older, I live there. I will be the director of our Chabad house. With God's help, this is my house, an house of goodness. Dear Mr. Modi, I love you and your people in India. I want to give you some present to remember me and Dolly Jerusalem. Picture of
What a touching message. A young man who's lost both his parents to a dastardly terrorist attack wants to come back to that same place, to that same house that his father used to head. And he wants to continue that long and rich tradition of the Holzberg family. Prime Minister Modi, too, replied to Moshe and thanked him for his very, very touching message. He gave him and his family a long-term visa to visit India whenever they want. This after Moshe's aunt and uncle, some of our viewers might remember this, they faced some visa problems back in 2009. They had to call off a visit to Mumbai. That grievance was redressed today.
Thank you for your very, very special gift.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. And we shall see you with us, okay? And you will see Prime Minister Modi again very soon. Thank you.
So, would you like to come and stay in India and Mumbai? You are most welcome. You and your all family members, they will get a long-term visa from my government. So anytime you can come, anywhere you can go.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, in case you want to see the complete meeting between Moshe and Modi, you can go to our website, news18.com. But stick around as we wrap up Face Off. On the other side, special coverage as the Indian Prime Minister gets ready to address a meeting of the Indian diaspora in Israel in what is already a groundbreaking, historic visit. We'll have continuing live coverage right on the other side.
Indians face to face on the border. And now Modi and Xi face to face at the G20. We'll keep track from Hamburg on CNN News 18.